I had counted 4 ways out of that cart before we reached the 2nd mile, and thrown all 4 away by the 3rd. The first was the obvious one. Wait for the dark, slide over the back rail, run for the tree line. But the man who had bought me rode close enough behind that I could hear his horse breathing, and he never once let the distance grow. 3 paces, always 3 paces. Far enough to be courteous, close enough to catch a woman who fancied herself clever. So I sat with my hands folded over the bundle that held everything I still owned: a comb, a clean shift, my mother's bone awl, and I studied him the way you study a lock you intend to pick. He had paid for me without haggling. That was the part I could not get past. My father had named a price meant to be argued down, the way you salt a wound you expect to be paid for. And the cloaked stranger had simply counted out the coin and turned his horse, as if the number had never been the thing he came for. No one pays the first price. Not for grain, not for a mule, and certainly not for a debtor's daughter sold to clear a season of bad luck and worse decisions. A man who does not haggle is a man who wants something other than what he is buying. I was 23, old enough to know that, and old enough to be afraid of it. I did not let him see the fear. I have a face I keep for collectors and creditors, smooth as a frozen pond, and I wore it for him the whole first day. He did not seem to require anything of me. He did not speak. He rode his 3 paces back and watched the road, and once, when the cartwheel caught a rut and pitched my bundle into the mud, he was off his horse and had it back in my lap before I had finished reaching for it. He did not say a word about that either. He only looked at the awl handle showing through the cloth, and something crossed his hooded face that I could not read, and then he was back in the saddle, and we went on. I decided I hated him. It was tidy and it was free, and it gave my hands something to do. The second night, he made the fire on my side of the camp. I noticed because I was cold and trying not to be seen being cold, and the heat reached me before I understood why. He had built it where the wind would carry the warmth to where I sat, and taken the cold side for himself. And he did it without comment, the way some men open doors, not as a kindness offered, but as a thing the body does before the mind can object. Then he set a cup of something hot on the stone between us, 3 paces of stone exactly, and went to see to the horses. I did not drink it for a long time. Then I drank it, because I was cold and the cup was right there, and pride is a poor blanket. You can take the bay mare in the morning, he said when he came back. His voice was low and even, like a man reading a list he had already decided not to argue with. The road behind us runs 3 days to the river crossing. Your father's debt is settled regardless of where you sleep tomorrow. You owe me nothing. I looked at him over the rim of the cup. You bought me to set me loose. I bought you. He stopped there, as if the sentence had gone somewhere he had not authorized. His jaw moved once. What you do after is yours. Most men who say that are lying. I am aware. He looked at the fire and not at me. You may find out which kind I am, or you may take the mare. Both are open roads. It was, I would learn, the most honest thing he ever said to me, and he said it before I knew his name. I should have taken the mare. I want that understood, because everything else in this story turns on the fact that I did not. In the morning, the bay was saddled and the road behind us was empty and free, and I stood looking at it for a long while with my bundle in my arms. He did not watch me decide. He gave me that, at least. He busied himself with a girth strap and let me have the choice in private, which is the only way a choice is ever really yours. I told myself I stayed because a man who does not haggle is a man with a secret, and I have never in my life been able to leave a secret alone. That was true. It was not all of it, but it was the part I could say to myself without flinching, so it was the part I used. We had been 4 days on the road when the patrol found us. They came out of the pines at a hard canter, a dozen riders in grey and iron, and my first thought was bandits, and my second was that my hated buyer had gone very still in a way that was not fear. He raised one gloved hand. The riders checked their horses so fast the lead mare nearly sat down in the road. Then he pushed back his hood. I had spent 4 days building him out of guesses. A merchant, a slaver, a minor lord with a taste for debtor brides. I had been wrong in every particular. He had a hard, unhurried face, and grey eyes that did not blink enough, and a white scar through one brow that I would later learn he did not remember earning. He looked like exactly what he was, which I did not yet know, but the patrol knew. Every rider in grey and iron came off the saddle and went down on one knee in the wet road, helms bowed, and the captain put his fist over his heart and said, "My king." The word went through me like cold water down the spine. I had been bought, transported, fed, and offered a horse by Halvar of the Iron Territories, the Alpha King whose name mothers use to make children behave, the strongest wolf alive. And I had spent 4 days deciding I hated him and drinking his tea. He did not look at the kneeling men. He looked at me, and I will tell you the truth, because the truth is the whole point of telling it at all. He looked like a man who had just been caught. They brought us through the gates of the Ironhold at dusk, and the whole fortress had heard before we crossed the bridge. That is the thing about a king who has never once brought a woman home. You do not need to announce it. The kitchens know, and the kitchens tell the stables, and the stables tell the guard, and by the time the great doors opened, the wolf throne hall was full of faces all arranged into the careful blankness of people who very much want to ask a question they are not permitted to ask. I knew that blankness. I had worn it myself, 4 days running. A woman came down the length of the hall to meet us, and she did not wear it. She wore something better made. A gown the colour of old wine, dark hair coiled with silver pins, the unbothered grace of someone who has never in her life had to wonder whether she belonged in a room. She stopped at a precise and insulting distance and looked at me the way you look at mud someone has tracked across a clean floor. "My king," she said to him warmly, "we did not expect you to return with cargo." Lady Sigrun. He had gone formal and flat, a drawbridge pulling up. "This is Wren. She is a guest of the hold." A guest? Sigrun's smile did not move. How novel. And where does a guest of the hold come from, that she arrives in a debtor's cart with a bone awl in her bundle, and the king riding rearguard like a hired man? The hall held its breath. Osric, the broad, grey-bearded baiter at the king's shoulder, shifted his weight in the particular way large men shift when they are calculating whether they will shortly need to stand between two people. I had a choice. I have learned that the king had been right about that. On the road, there is always a choice, and the only question is whether you can see it in time. I could have looked at the floor. It was what the gown wanted. I looked at Lady Sigrun instead, and I let my collector's face go, and I let her see that I had counted every pin in her hair and found them wanting. I come from a village 3 days past the river crossing, where we cannot afford to look at a person and see only what they cost. I let the silence do a little of the work. You will forgive me, it is a poor habit of the poor. I heard, somewhere down the hall, a single startled breath that someone tried very hard to swallow. Sigrun's smile finally moved. Just at the corner. Just enough. "Charming," she said, and it was a sentence with a knife folded inside it. "I look forward to discovering what you are for." She turned in a sweep of wine-dark skirts and left, and the king watched her go with no expression at all. And I understood 3 things in quick succession. That the woman in the gown had expected, for some long time, to be the one standing where I stood. That she was not a fool. And that I had just made, in my first hour under his roof, an enemy who would not give me the courtesy of a fair fight. I would have liked to feel clever about the way I had handled her. Mostly, I felt the cold of the stone coming up through my thin shoes, and the strange new weight of the king standing exactly 3 paces away, watching me as if I had done something he had not known a person could do. They gave me to the healer's wing, which suited me, because hands that have learnt to set a bone and bind a wound do not sit idle well, and my mother's awl had been a healer's awl before it was a relic. Within a week, the old healer let me grind her tinctures. Within 2, she let me hold the needle. Work is the one currency that does not care where you were born, and I had always been rich in it. The king I saw at the edges, a figure at the high table who ate little and watched the doors. A shape in the corridor who altered his path, I noticed, so that we did not pass close. 3 paces, always. It would have been easy to read as contempt. The court read it as contempt. I heard the kitchen talk. The king tolerates the debtor woman. The king will tire of his odd whim. Lady Sigrun need only wait. I almost read it that way myself. What stopped me was the small things, and I have always been a creature of small things. A book appeared in the healer's wing, a herbal, rare and well made, left on the bench where I worked, with no name attached. The fire in my room was laid each evening before I returned to it, by no hand I ever caught. When the winter teeth came down off the mountains, and the healer fretted about the cost of beeswax for the burn salve, 3 crates of it arrived from the king's own stores, and the steward who delivered them could not, when I asked, say who had ordered it. I am a healer's apprentice and a debtor's daughter, and I have spent my whole life reading what people do instead of what they say, because what they say is for sale, and what they do is not. And what this man did, over and over, in the dark, without signature, was take care of me, and then keep 3 paces of cold stone between us in the light, as if the distance could unsay the warmth. A man does not hide a cruelty. He hides a tenderness he has decided he is not allowed to have. If you have stayed with me this far, stay a little longer. What I found in that library is the part I have told almost no one. The part where this stopped being a story about a man who bought me and became something I am still not certain I have the words for. If her side of it is keeping you company tonight, follow along and I will keep telling it. I went looking for the reason. Of course I did. I told you I cannot leave a secret alone. The library of the Ironhold is a long, high room that smells of cold parchment and pine resin, and the king was in it the night I came for answers, which I had not expected and did not, in the moment, regret. He stood at the far table with a book open under his hands, green leather worn pale at the spine from handling. He did not hear me at first, or pretended he did not, and I had a moment to watch him that he had not arranged. And what I saw was a man reading something the way you read a wound, to see if it has worsened in the night. You leave fires, I said. His hands went still on the book. The wing is cold. You leave herbals, and beeswax, and a guest in the healer's wing she did not ask to be. I crossed half the distance and stopped, because I had learned his rule, and I wanted him to feel me break it. You bought a woman to set her free, and then you did not set her free. You keep her 3 paces off in the daylight and warm in the dark. I have stood in this hold a month, my king, and I have one question, and you owe me nothing, but I am going to ask it anyway. He looked at me then. The grey eyes did not blink enough, and behind them something moved that was not his. Something older and surer and entirely uninterested in his composure. "Ask," he said, and his voice did the thing the kitchen talk had never mentioned. It frayed, just at the edge, just on the one word. "Why did you not let me take the mare?" For a long moment, the only sound was the fire and the wind working at the high windows.
"I told you to," he said.
"You saddled it and looked away. That is not the same as wanting me gone." I held his eyes the way no one in that hole dared, because I had nothing his court was afraid to lose. "You wanted me gone, and you could not make yourself watch the road to be sure I went. Which is it?" His jaw moved once, twice, the way it had on the first night, a man losing an argument with his own mouth. He shut the green book. He came around the table and stopped. 3 paces. "Both," he said. "It is both, every hour, and it does not resolve. Now go back to the wing, Wren, please." It was the please that undid me. A king does not say please. A king has men to make the word unnecessary. He said it like it had cost him a tooth, and I went, because I had what I came for, which was the certainty that I had not imagined the warmth, and a new question worth more than the old one. What does a man read every night in a green book that he holds like a fresh wound? I found out 8 days later, and it broke the story I had been telling myself clean in half. He was called away to settle a border dispute, 2 days' ride, and he left in a grey dawn without seeking me out, the way he always left. The library was unlocked. I am not proud of what I did, but I have never claimed to be a better woman than I am. And the green book was there, on the table, where his hands knew to find it. It was a ledger, not of grain or gold, of people. Page after page of names in his own hard hand, each with a sum beside it, and a place. A village, a market, a debtor's jail. And beside each name, drawn through it in a single deliberate line, the word freed. Years of it, hundreds of them. Debt-bonded men and women he had bought, the way he had bought me, paid for without haggling and quietly let loose. Given coin and a road and their own name back. A king moving in disguise through his own territory, undoing one cruelty at a time, and telling no one, because the telling would have made it a policy, and he did not want it to be a policy. He wanted it to be a debt he was paying. To whom, the ledger did not say. I turned to the last page, and there I was. Wren, the sum my father had named. The village 3 days past the crossing. And my name was not struck through with freed. My name was crossed out, and written again, and crossed out, and written again. 4 times, 5, the ink going darker each pass where the nib had dug deeper and deeper. A man at a table in the dark, arguing with himself, writing freed and unable to mean it. Writing it and striking it because his hand would not finish the word, until the page beneath the name was nearly worn through. I understood then what both meant. He had not been keeping me. He had been trying every night to set me free, the way he had set free hundreds before me, and something in him would not let the pen complete the line. And he had hated himself for it 3 paces deep, every single day, in front of his whole court. And I had thought it was contempt. I sat down on the cold library floor with the ledger in my lap, and I did not feel clever at all. I felt as though I had walked a month past a door I thought was a wall. Osric found me there. The beater did not ask what I was reading. He could see it. He lowered himself onto the bench with the care of an old soldier and looked at the green ledger for a while. "His mother's name is on the first page," he said at last. "Did you find it?" I had not. I turned back. There it was. The very first entry, in a younger and less certain hand. A woman's name, a sum, a village, and no freed beside it. Just a date, and below the date, a second date, 4 months later.
She was a debt bride, Osric said. Sold north to pay her family's tithe, to a lord who took her as a wolf takes a thing he is owed. The alpha that was, Halvar's father, bought her off that lord, meaning the old kind of mercy, the kind that keeps. She was his mate. He knew it the moment he saw her, and she could not. The old man stopped and started again, more carefully. A bond can be refused. She refused it, because she had been bought once and would not be a thing that was bought again, not even by the man fate had chosen. Refusal is not free. It took her in 4 months. The boy watched it take her. The 2 dates, 4 months apart. He swore an oath at her grave, Osric went on, and his voice had gone to gravel. Witnessed, the binding kind, sworn on her bones and his own wolf, that no debtor would ever again be brought into the house of the Iron King. He has kept it for 20 years. It is why the ledger ends in freed. Every name, set loose, never kept. The oath would not allow keeping. It is woven into him. The cold came up through the floor and into my hands. The cold was already in my hands. And then his wolf chose a woman in a debtor's cart. Osric looked at me with something close to pity, which I did not want, and something close to hope, which frightened me more. His wolf knew you in the market the moment he saw you, he said, before his mind did. That is why he paid the first price. He did not hear the haggling. He heard nothing but the bond. And now the oath he swore and the mate his wolf chose are at war inside one man, and the war does not end in a truce. The oath tightens on the wolf a little more each day he keeps you under this roof. I have served him since he was a pup, lass. I have watched it. He is being slowly torn in two, between the only vow he has ever kept and the only thing he has ever wanted. And he will not tell you, because telling you would be asking you to choose him. And he has sworn never again to let a debt-bought woman be asked for anything at all. The ledger lay open in my lap, my name worn nearly through the page. I had come to the iron hold to find a secret and pick it like a lock. I had found a man dying quietly of his own decency, and a dead woman's name with no freed beside it. And I was, I realised, no longer at all interested in the road behind us. Lady Sigrun was interested in the ledger too. I learnt that the hard way. She had her own paths through that hold, older ones than mine, older than the king's patience. And she had been waiting 20 years for the bond she believed she was owed, and she was not, as I had noted my first hour, a fool. She knew what I had found before I had finished finding it. And she knew, far better than I, what could be done with it. She did it in open court, on the night the king returned. She stood up before the high table while the hall was full, while the king sat grey and thinner than he had been a month before, the oath eating him by inches. And she laid it all out in a voice pitched to reach the back of the room. That the king had broken his own sworn law, that he had brought a debt bride into his house, the one act he had vowed on his mother's bones never to permit. That the wolf they followed had become an oath-breaker for a healer's apprentice, and an oath-breaker king cannot hold the throne. And she called, sweetly, ruinously, for the bond to be dissolved, and the debtor woman cast out, before the king's broken vow brought a curse down on the whole pack.
and she had brought a champion to make the point with teeth. Her cousin Dacian, a heavy-shouldered northern lord with a challenger's grin, stepped into the open floor and called the dominance challenge. The old physical kind, blood drawn, thrown at stake, knowing, as Sigrun knew, that the king was being hollowed out by the very oath she had just announced to the world. The hall erupted. Osric was on his feet, and the king stood slowly, and I watched the cost of standing in his face, and I understood that Sigrun had timed it perfectly. He could not win a challenge with his wolf half severed by the oath, and he could not refuse one without losing the throne, and with it, every freed in that green book, because a deposed king's law dies with his reign, and the debtors after me would have no quiet stranger paying the first price in the dark. He looked at me across the crowded hall, 3 paces and 100 more, the farthest he had ever stood from me. And he chose, at the worst possible moment, to stop lying. "She names me Oathbreaker," he said to the hall, in that flat drawbridge voice. "She is right. I brought a debtor into my house. I have tried for a month to free her, every night, and I could not finish the word." He did not look away from me, not because the oath forbade it, because I did not want to. My mother died, refusing to be a thing that was bought. I will not compound her death by being a king who buys. So I will not free this woman against her will, and I will not keep her against it either. The choice was always hers. It is hers now, whatever it costs me. It was the most words I had ever heard him say at once, and every one of them was a man laying down his sword in the middle of a fight. The hall did not know what to do with it. Sigrun did. She smiled her corner smile and gestured at Dacian, and the floor was cleared for blood, and the king stepped down toward a fight he could not survive, because surviving it would have meant breaking faith with a grave. So I did the only thing I have ever been good at. I looked at a problem long enough to see the lock inside it. The oath bound him because his mother had been a thing that was bought and could not unmake herself into a thing that was free. The oath ended in freed and could never end in kept, because keeping was the cruelty it was sworn against. But I was not a thing that was bought. I had been offered a mare and an open road, and I had stood looking at it with my bundle in my arms, and I had chosen, in private, where no one could buy or sell the choice, to stay. The oath was sworn to protect a woman from being kept against her will. It had never once been tested by a woman choosing to stay of her own. I walked into the cleared floor before Dacian's blade came up. "The debt is paid," I said, loud enough for the kitchens to hear it. He said so on the road, before I knew his name, before there was a throne to win or lose by it. I owe this house nothing. I am no man's cargo, and no man's bride by debt. I turned from the hall to the king, and I crossed the open floor toward him, and I watched him go still, the way he had gone still the first time I broke his rule. I am a free woman, of a village 3 days past the crossing, and I am choosing, with nothing owed and nothing bought, to stay. Let the oath answer that. I do not have good words for what happened next. I have told it many times, and the words are always poor. The oath answered. It came up out of the stone floor where his mother's binding had been sworn, and it was cold. A cold with a will in it, old and grieving, and certain that to be bought was to be doomed, and it did not believe me. It closed on the air in my lungs and tried to take the breath I needed to finish choosing. Frost crept white across the back of my hands. I had taken the iron oath token from the table as I passed, I do not remember deciding to, and I closed my fist on its edge until it cut, because the pain was mine, freely taken, and the pain was the whole argument. Blood on my palm. My choice, paid in my own coin, the first price without haggling. I stay. The words came through a throat the cold was trying to close. Freely. Test it as long as you like. The answer does not change. And the old grief in the stone, 20 years of a boy's vow that the bought are always lost, broke against a woman who had not been bought and could not hold, and let go. The cold went out of the room all at once. The king came back into himself between one breath and the next, his wolf surging up, whole and freed, the severing undone. And Dacian's challenge died in his throat, because there is no challenging an alpha whose wolf has just been returned to him entire, in front of his entire court. And then, this is the part the kitchens still tell, the king's wolf bowed to me, not the man. The man was too proud and too stunned. The wolf came up in his grey eyes, and Halvar of the Iron Territories, the strongest wolf alive, went down on one knee on the bloody stone in front of the court that had called me cargo, and bowed his head, the way his patrol had bowed to him on the road, to a debtor's daughter with a cut palm and frost melting off her hands. I looked at Lady Sigrun over his bowed head. I did not raise my voice. I had learned, my first hour, that I did not need to. You asked what I was for. The hall was quiet enough to carry it. I think we have found it. She left the hold within the week, stripped of her standing by a court that had watched its king kneel, her cousin Dacian disgraced beside her, the two of them riding out the same gate I had been carried in through, and I will not pretend I felt nothing. Watching the wine-dark gown go small on the river road, I felt the cold satisfaction of a lock that finally turns. I am not a better woman than I am. There was fallout. There is always fallout. A king does not kneel to a debt-bought healer's apprentice without the whole north hearing of it, and there were lords who muttered, and a rival pack that sniffed for weakness, and a season of careful work for Osric and the king. And in time, for me, to turn a broken oath and a scandalous Luna into something the pack could be proud of, rather than merely afraid of. Being chosen is not the end of the work. It is the start of a different kind. But that is a longer story, and a happier one, and I will tell it another night. He closed the 3 paces eventually. I had wondered if he would even know how. It was the green ledger that did it in the end. A month after the court, he brought it to the healer's wing and set it on my bench, open to the last page, where my name had been crossed out and written and crossed out near, through the parchment. He had a pen. His jaw moved once, the old habit. I could finish it now, he said. Strike it through. Freed, you are. Whatever you wish. I looked at the worn, pale spine of the book he had read like a wound every night for years, and at all the names set loose ahead of mine, and at the single name that he had never been able to let go. I closed the ledger over the pen. Leave it unstruck, I said. I am not a name you freed. I am the one who stayed. And the man who did not haggle, who hid every tenderness 3 paces deep, who had not let himself want a single thing he was not allowed to keep. He crossed the stone between us at last, all of it, and he did not stop at 3 paces, and he kissed me. I will not tell you how. That belongs to me. I will tell you only that it was the first thing he had taken without first deciding he was forbidden it, and that something in me that had been braced since the back of a debtor's cart finally set its burden down, and that I understood, with his hands not on a sword or a book or a ledger, but only, gently, finally, holding mine. That I had been recognised, not bought, not freed, seen and chosen back. A year on, I keep the green ledger on a shelf in the Luna's solar, closed. He retired it, the disguise and the dark rides both, the season after we wed, not because the work was done, but because a king who kneels in open court need not move in secret any more. There is a magistrate now, and a writ, and a fund with the throne's seal on it, and debtors 3 days past the crossing, and well beyond it, walk into the iron hold by daylight, and walk out free with their own names in their own hands. The ledger does not need a hard man writing in the dark. It became a policy after all. He minded less than he thought he would. A letter came last month from my father, who is older and poorer in spirit than in coin these days, and writes the way men write when they have understood, too late, the worth of what they sold. I have not decided what to answer. I have a year to decide, and a warm fire he still builds on my side of the room, out of a habit he will not admit to, and a king who has learnt to say please for things he is allowed to want, which turns out to be a great many things. He passed through the solar this morning while I was writing this, and stopped behind my chair, exactly 1 pace back, just to prove to me that he can, and then closed it because he wanted to. 3 paces was never the distance. I know that now. It was only the length of the argument he was losing, the whole long way down a debtor's road before he let himself arrive. Tell me, did you see who he was before he took off the hood, or did he fool you the way he fooled me all 4 days of that cart? Come find me in the comments and tell me where you are listening from tonight and what you would have done with that open road and that saddled mare. And if her side of the story is the kind you want more of, stay close. There are more names in that green ledger, and every one of them has a night like this in it.